Atheism and paganism do not actually conflict. So recently I've been dealing with a TikToker who is just not wanting to hear anything outside of the typical theist arguments because she's reacting like she's hearing the typical theist arguments, but that's not what's happening. What's happening is I'm explaining things in the ways that I'm going to elaborate in this video, but rather than hear those, she's just acting like a great value Matt Dillahunty and just spitting out the same arguments that he and people like Christopher Hitchens have been making for a long time. The problem here is that they just are not listening to arguments other than my God exists because of XYZ, and they want to hear my God exists because XYZ, because those are the easy arguments to actually dispel, because there is no proof that the gods exist. The only thing that's really out there is gnosis. That's it. We have anecdotal evidence that gods exist, and that is it. That is not something that would hold up to any kind of scrutiny, any kind of scientific analysis. And as a pagan, I do not believe in any kind of grandiose battle of good versus evil, light versus dark, where I have to save your soul. And because of that, I do not need to believe in any kind of hard theistic perspective. It's not required. For that matter, I don't care if the gods are real or not. It doesn't really affect me. If the gods solely exist as abstract concepts, that's fine. There also are more entities within the heathen worldview specifically that I can interact with and venerate. I don't need gods. I can see the Landvatir as being an anthropomorphized concept as a label that I put on the land to remind me in a semiotic sense that I need to take care of my environment and coexist with my environment, not just use my environment. I don't just give offerings because I believe there's a spiritual aspect to the Vatir. I give offerings to the Vatir because I am punctuating the fact that we need to be stewards of the land, which is actually something that's in the Bible in Genesis, by the way, and Christians seem to ignore because honestly their religion has been railroaded by those in power. But that's a topic for another day. It is perfectly valid if you only believe in the gods as abstract concepts that we label on certain mental faculties, right? Maybe Loki solely exists as that archetype of the trickster. I don't know, and I don't live my life as though he is a flesh and blood entity that I could interact with. As an archetypal polytheist, I do believe the gods exist as abstract concepts and that they have a spiritual equivalent in some kind of parallel reality to ours. But that, again, is purely gnosis. That is purely my anecdotal evidence and is not something that I believe is empirical. But more importantly, I don't believe it's harmful. And that's really something that we should focus on. One of the many reasons that I consistently say the phrase, all pagans are valid, except those with beliefs that cause harm, it's really the harm that we need to focus on. Historically, the reasons that religion has been bad is because people in power have abused the beliefs of others in order to gain leverage and abuse them in some way, shape, or form. You see it constantly in the news today. And that's really what we should be focusing on. If your beliefs aren't causing any harm, then it really doesn't matter. Because how does it harm anybody if I, even in bloat with my kindred, hail Odin and believe that I am strengthening Odin in some way, shape, or form through my worship and veneration? It's not harming anybody for me to build that community and for us to come together. It would harm somebody if we came together with that belief and performed a human sacrifice, for example. That's actually an argument that Vouch kept making when talking to Ocean in this hour and 45-minute video that I watched, and it was really a waste of an hour and 45 minutes because neither of them really made any good points and they're really just talking past each other, but I digress. This is actually a really good book full of examples of people that are non-theistic, atheistic, or any degree of not believing in hard polytheist gods, because there are many different perspectives on how you see the gods. The guy that actually wrote the foreword, Mark Green, has a website called Paganism. You could check out this book, check out his website. But there are 1,001 ways to see the gods. It's more important that we wonder what's out there. One of the ways that I examine the gods and religion is through something called semiotics. Semiotics is the study of symbols and symbolism and how we understand the world through symbols and symbolism. It makes sense to anthropomorphize thunder, for example, as Thor, because on an emotional level, we don't think about electrons, smashing into each other and the earth being magnetized in a certain way and all that. We see, thunder go boom, and there's an emotional reaction to that. It's the same way that if I look at a flower, I'm not thinking about this being the reproductive organs of a plant. I'm thinking about the beauty of that flower. When I hear the word tree, I'm not thinking about the definition of a tree. A tree pops in my mind, and it might be a certain type of tree, maybe a certain type of tree that I'm used to, maybe one I grew up with. That's how our minds work on this emotional level. It's perfectly fine to have that logical understanding of the world and live in a very logical way. And to be honest, I go back and forth on whether or not the gods are real or not, and to what degree the gods are real or not. But again, that's part of wondering. It's perfectly fine to wonder about things, to have that sort of whimsy. This day and age, we try to sanitize things so much. That's kind of what anti-theists like Great Value Matt Dillahunty here try to do, because they're not willing to look at the world in a different way. I see things through my meat computer. And if you look at certain things like machine learning AI, for example, which is not even a true intelligence, these computers that we're building nowadays lack some of that emotional intelligence that allows us to see the world through a more artistic lens. That was one of the reasons in my Gods Never Left video, I talked about how art is an extension of divinity. And you'll notice that it coincides, right? The lore is stories. Stories are a form of art. These stories evolve over time and get embellished. Depictions of the gods, statues, these are forms of art. We are looking at the world with that artistic part of our brain. We can philosophize and discuss what kind of spiritual things may exist beyond us, but the provable part is that we are creating art. We are looking through things with that artistic lens, through that emotional lens. Art and emotion mesh. They are connected. I am not trying to fight for anyone's mortal soul. I do not care if the gods are real or not. It doesn't matter to me. If we woke up tomorrow and all of the science forever was proven and we have no margin that allows us to believe in anything externally beyond that, I am perfectly content with still being heathen, with still being pagan, and looking at the gods as abstract concepts. It does not change who I am. As long as your beliefs don't cause any kind of harm, it really doesn't matter. And it's perfectly fine that we wonder about things that are beyond us.